Chinese personal names are names adopted by those from mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, and the Chinese diaspora overseas. Due to China's historical dominance of East Asian culture, many names used in Korea and Vietnam are adaptations of Chinese names, or have historical roots in Chinese, with appropriate adaptation to accommodate linguistic differences. Modern Chinese names consist of a surname known as xing, which comes first and is usually monosyllabic, but not always, followed by a personal name called ming, which is nearly always mono or disyllabic. Prior to the 20th century, educated Chinese also utilized a courtesy name or style name called zi, by which they were known among those outside of the family and closest friends. From at least the time of the Shang dynasty, the Han Chinese observed a number of naming taboos regulating who may or may not use a person's given name. In general, using the given name connoted the speaker's authority and superior position to the addressee. Peers and younger relatives were barred from speaking it. Owing to this, many historical Chinese figures, particularly emperors, used a half-dozen or more different names in different contexts and for different speakers. Those possessing names identical to the emperors were frequently forced to change them. The normalization of personal names after the May 4th movement has generally eradicated aliases such as the school name and courtesy name, but traces of the old taboos remain, particularly within families. History. Although some terms in the ancient Chinese naming system, such as xing and ming, are still used today, they were used in different and more complex ways than in modern China. In the first half of the first millennium BC, during the Zhou dynasty, members of the Chinese nobility could possess up to 4 different names: personal names, clan names, lineage names, and style or courtesy names, and up to 2 titles, standard titles, and posthumous titles. Commoners possessed only a personal name, and the modern concept of a surname or family name did not yet exist at any level of society. The old lineage and clan names began to become family names in the modern sense and trickled down to commoners around 500 BC. During the late spring and autumn period, but the process took several centuries to complete, and it was not until the late Han dynasty that all Chinese commoners had surnames, family names. Although there are currently over 4,000 Chinese surnames in use in China, the colloquial expression for the Chinese people is the Beijiaxing 100 family surnames, and a mere 100 surnames still make up over 85% of China's 1.3 billion citizens. In fact, just the top 3, Huang, Li, and Zhang, cover more than 20% of the population. This homogeneity results from the great majority of Han family names having only one character, while the small number of compound surnames is mostly restricted to minority groups. This has not always been true in Chinese history. Between the 1st and 5th centuries AD, a law against multiple character personal names briefly popularized 2-character surnames, and a number of important figures like Du Zhiliang and Sima Qian possessed them. Chinese surnames arose from 2 separate prehistoric traditions, the Xing and the Shi. The original Xing were clans of royalty at the Shang court and always included the woman radical. The Shi did not originate from families, but denoted fiefs, states, and titles granted or recognized by the Shang court. Apart from the Jiang and Lao families, the original Xing have nearly disappeared, but the terms ironically reversed the meaning. Xing is now used to describe the Shi surnames which replaced them, while Shi is used to refer to maiden names. The enormous modern clans names sometimes share ancestral halls with one another, but actually consist of many different lineages gathered under a single name. As an example, the surname Ma includes descendants of the Warring States-era bureaucrat Zhao Shi, descendants of his subjects in his fief of Mafu, Koreans from an unrelated confederation, and Muslims from all over Western China who chose it to honor Muhammad. Nonetheless, however tenuous these bonds sometimes are, it remains a minor taboo to marry someone with the same family name. In modern mainland China, it is the norm that a married woman keeps her name unchanged without adopting her husband's surname. A child usually inherits her father's surname, though the marriage law explicitly states that a child may use either parents of the grandparents. It is also possible, though far less common, for a child to combine both parents' surnames. In the older generations, it was also common for a married woman to prepend her husband's surname to her own. This practice is now almost extinct in mainland China, though there are few exceptions such as the name change of Gu Kailai, but survives in some Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan families. Usually women who consider themselves playing a significant role in the society are more willing to add the husband's surname in her name. Given names. Chinese given names show much greater diversity than the surnames, while still being restricted almost universally to one or two syllables. Including variant forms, there are at least 106,000 individual Chinese characters, but as of 2006, in the People's Republic of China Public Security Bureau only approximately 32,000 are supported for computer input and even fewer are in common use. Given names are chosen based on a range of factors, including possession of pleasing sound and tonal qualities, as well as bearing positive associations or a beautiful shape. Two character mings may be chosen for each character's separate meaning and qualities, but the name remains a single unit which is almost always said together even when the combination no longer means anything. Today, two-character names are more common and make up more than 80% of Chinese names. However, this custom has been consistent only since the Ming dynasty. About 70% of all names were only one character long during the early Han, and that rose beyond 98% after the usurping Wang Mang banned all two-character names outright. Although his Xin dynasty was short-lived, the law was not repealed until 400 years later, when northern invasions and interest in establishing lineages revived interest in such longer names. The Tang and Song saw populations with a majority of two-character names for the first time, but the Liao between them and the Yuan afterward both preferred single-character names. The restoration of Han dominance under the Ming, promotion of Han culture under the Qing, and development of generation names established the current traditions. Given names resonant of qualities which are perceived to be either masculine or feminine are frequently given, with males being linked with strength and firmness and females with beauty and flowers. It is also more common for female names to employ diminutives like Xiao or doubled characters in the formal names, although there are famous male examples such as Li Xiaoping and Yo-Yo Ma. People from the countryside previously often bore names that reflect rural life, for example, Danya and Daja, but such names are becoming less common. It is also considered bad form to name a child after a famous person, although tens of thousands might happen to share a common name such as Lu Xiang. Similarly, owing to the traditional naming taboos, it is very uncommon in China China to name a child directly after a relative, since such children would permit junior family members to inappropriately use the personal names of senior ones. Ancestors can leave a different kind of mark. Chinese naming schemes often employ a generation name. Every child recorded into the family records in each generation would share an identical character in the names. 16. 32 or more generations would be worked out in advance to form a generation poem. For example, the one selected in 1737 for the family of Mao to Situng read, "Stand tall and amp, display unstintingly before gentlemen, and study an amp method will expand the borders of our fortune." Ancestral favors bequeath kindness through the ages. Descendants forever obliged for the prosperity. This scheme was in its 14th generation when Mao rejected it for the naming of his own children, preferring to give his sons the generational name instead. A similar practice was observed regarding the stage names of Chinese opera performers. All the students entering a training academy in the same year would adopt the same first character in the new given name. For example, as part of the class entering the National Drama School in 1933, Liu adopted a name with the central character J. Depending on the region and particular family, daughters were not entered into the family records and thus did not share the boy's generation name, although they may have borne a separate one among themselves. Even where generation names are not used, siblings' names are frequently related, so that a boy named Song might have a sister named Mei. Traditional female names sometimes also reflected the male chauvinism of ancient China, with names like Lady, Zhaodi, and Pandi all essentially meaning seeking a little brother. A similar name was Yurao, meaning also good. More recently, although such chauvinistic names have become a rarity and generation names have become less common, many personal names reflect periods of Chinese history. For example, following the victory of the Communists in the Civil War, many Chinese bore revolutionary names such as Qiangguo or Dongfeng. Similarly, on Taiwan, it used to be common to incorporate one of the four characters of the name Republic of China into masculine names. Periodic fad names like Aoyun also appear. Owing to both effects, there has also been a recent trend in China to hire fortune tellers to change people's names to new ones more in accordance with traditional Taoist and five-element practices. Spelling. The process of converting Chinese names into a phonetic alphabet is called romanization. In mainland China, Chinese names have been romanized using the Hanny pinyin system since 1958. Although experiments with the complete conversion of Chinese to the pinyin alphabet fail, it remains in common use and has become the transcription system of the Government of Singapore, the United Nations, and the International Organization for Standardization. After many decades of avoiding its use, Taiwan formally adopted pinyin as its new phonetic system in 2009, although it continues to allow its citizens to use other romanizations on official documents such as passports. The Russian influence system is easily identified by its pronounced use of uncommon letters such as Q, X, and Z when tones are included. They are noted via tone marks. In pinyin, is written as Mao Zedong. Proper use of pinyin romanization means treating the surname and given name as precisely two separate words with no spaces between the letters of multiple characters. For example, is properly rendered either with its tone marks as Zhuangziang or without as Zhuangziang. but should not be written as Zhuang Xiu Ying, Huang Xiang, Zhuang Xiang, and so on. In the rare cases where a surname consists of more than one character, it too should be written as a unit. Simakian, not Simakian or Simakian. However, as the Chinese language makes almost no use of spaces, native speakers often do not know these rules and simply space between each character of the name, causing those used to phonetically spelled languages to think of the xing and ming as 3 words instead of 2. The switch to pinyin is still quite new for Taiwan, and many non-standard spellings continue to be found, including li and zung. Similarly, many Taiwanese and historic names still employ the older Wade-Giles system. This English-influenced system is identified by its use of the digraphs hs and ts, and by its use of hyphens to connect the syllables of multi-character words. Correct reading depends on the inclusion of superscript numbers and the use of apostrophes to distinguish between different consonants. But in practice both of these are commonly omitted. In Wade-Giles is written Mautasitang, as the system hyphenates names between the characters. For example, Zhuangxiang and Simakian are written in Wade as Zhuang 2 Hsiu 4 Ying 1 and Ssu 1 Ma 3 Qian 1. Pinyin and Wade both represent the pronunciation of Mandarin, based on the Beijing dialect. In Hong Kong, Macau, and the diaspora communities in Southeast Asia and abroad, the Chinese often Romanize according to the sounds of their own languages, particularly Cantonese, Hokkien, and Hakka. This occurs amid a plethora of competing Romanization systems. In Hong Kong, many Chinese who grew up under the British occupation adopted English spelling conventions for the names, Li for Li, Shaw for Shao, and so forth. In Macau, Chinese names are similarly sometimes still transliterated based on Portuguese orthography. The Chinese from the diaspora communities in Malaysia and Singapore fully divide the characters in the names with spaces as a matter of course. A final point is that, although characters have remained roughly the same since the Han Dynasty and some classical grammar is still part of the core curriculum of Chinese secondary schools, vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation have all changed from Old to Middle to Modern Chinese even within the prestige dialects. Thus, although modern Chinese read Confucius as Kongfuzi, the same title would have been Kung Puzi in the Tang Dynasty and was probably something like an atonal Kongpatsa during his lifetime. Of course, at the time, he would have been addressed by his courtesy name Trungsnes instead. Alternative names. For their earliest recorded history, the Chinese observed a number of naming taboos, avoiding the names of their elders, ancestors, and rulers out of respect and fear. As a result, the upper classes of traditional Chinese culture typically employed a variety of names over the course of their lives, and the emperors and sanctified deceased had still others. Current naming practices are more straightforward and consistent, but a few pseudonyms or alternate names remain common. When discussing Chinese writers, Chinese and Japanese scholars do not consistently use particular names, whether they are private names or alternative names. Current milk name. Traditionally, babies were named 100 days after the birth. Modern naming laws in the People's Republic of China grant the parents a month before requiring the baby to be registered. Upon birth, the parents often use a milk name, typically employing diminutives like CO or doubled characters before a formal name is settled upon, often in consultation with the grandparents. The milk name may be abandoned but is often continued as a form of familial nickname. A superstitious custom sometimes attached to the milk name is to select a disgusting name, in order to ward off evil spirits who might wish to harm the child. Nicknames are acquired in China in much the same way they are in other countries. Not everyone has one. Most that received theirs in childhood or adolescence from family or friends. Common Chinese nicknames are those based on a person's physical attributes, speaking style, or behavior. Names involving animals are common, although those animals may be associated with different attributes than they are in English. For example, Chinese cows are strong, not stupid. Foxes are devious, not clever. Pigs are ugly, lazy, stupid, or content, but not dirty. Similarly, nicknames that might seem especially insulting in English, such as little fatty, are more acceptable in Chinese. One especially common method of creating nicknames is prefixing SEO to the surname of the second character of the given name. A is more common in southern China and abroad, while CO is common throughout China. Both A and CO are distinguished from Lao. Nicknames are rarely used in formal or semi-formal settings, although a famous exception is A Bayan. Western name. English is taught throughout China's secondary schools, and the English language section is a required component of the Gaokao, China's college entrance examination. Many Chinese teenagers thus acquire English names, which they may keep and use as nicknames even in Chinese language contexts. Chinese may adopt English names for a variety of reasons, including foreigners' difficulty with Chinese tones and the modern Chinese tendency to regard foreign names as modern or egalitarian. The freedom associated with choosing a Chinese given name sometimes leads to choosing English names which seem bizarre to native English speakers. Names like chlorophyll candy, devil or whale are pretty common in Hong Kong because of its 1.5-century British rule. Many Hong Kong people will pick English names as early as attending English classes in kindergarten, or even have the English alias embedded in official documentation. The English aliases are widely used at schools and at work, similar to Singapore, which shares a similar historical development. It is very common among Hong Kongers to address each other with an English alias. An English alias can be accepted as part of the name in official documentation, but whether to include such is an option to individuals. It is also becoming more popular for parents to give their child a middle name in between the given name and family name, similar to those of Westerners. School name. The school name was a separate formal name used by the child while they were at school. As binomial nomenclature is also called xue acute ming in Chinese, the school name is also sometimes now referenced as the zunming to avoid confusion. Courtesy name. Upon maturity, it was common for educated males to acquire a courtesy name either from one's parents, a teacher, or self-selection. The name commonly mirrored the meaning of one's given name or displayed his birth order within his family. The practice was a consequence of admonitions in the Book of Rights that among adults it is disrespectful to be addressed by one's given name by others within the same generation. The true given name was reserved for the use of one's elders, while the courtesy name was employed by peers on formal occasions and in writing. The practice was decried by the May 4th movement and has been largely abandoned. Pseudonyms or aliases or pen names were self-selected alternative courtesy names, most commonly 3 or 4 characters long. They may have originated from too many people having the same courtesy name. Some, but by no means most, authors to continue to employ stylized pen names. A noted example is the exile and dissident poet Zhao Zhangkai, whose pen name is Bei Dao. Posthumous name. Posthumous names were honorary names selected after a person's death, used extensively for royalty. The common names of most Chinese emperors before the Tang dynasty, with the pointed exception of Shi Huangdi, are the posthumous ones. In addition to emperors, successful courtiers and politicians such as Sun Yat-sen also occasionally received posthumous titles. Temple name. The temple name of the emperor inscribed on the spiritual tablets of the imperial ancestral temple often differed from his posthumous name. The structure eventually became highly restricted, consisting of a single adjective and either zu or zong. These common names of the emperors between the Tang and the Yuan of the temple ones era name. The era name arose from the custom of dating years by the reigns of the ruling emperors. Under the Han, the practice began of changing regnal names as means of dispensing with bad luck and attracting better. Almost all era names were literary and employed exactly two characters. By the Ming and Qing dynasties, emperors had largely dispensed with the practice and kept a single era name during the reign, such that it is customary to refer to Ming and Qing emperors by their era names. Forms of address. Within families, it is often considered inappropriate or even offensive to use the given names of relatives who are senior to the speaker. Instead, it is more customary to identify each family member by abstract hierarchical connections amongst siblings, gender and birth order. For the extended family, the manner of relationship, the hierarchical titles of junior relatives are seldom used except in formal situations, or as indirect reference when speaking to family members who are even younger than the person in question. Children can be called by the given names, or their parents may use the nicknames. When speaking of non-family social acquaintances, people are generally referred to by a title. For example, Mother Leah, Mrs. Zhu. Personal names are used when referring to adult friends to children, although unlike in the West, referring to somebody by the full name is common even among friends, especially if the person's full name is only 2 syllables. It is common to refer to a person as Lao or Xiao followed by the family name, thus Lao Wang or Xiao Zhang. Xiao is also frequently used as a diminutive when it is typically paired with the second or only character in a person's name, rather than the surname. Note that because old people are well respected in Chinese society, Lao does not carry disrespect, offense or any negative implications even if it is used to refer to an older woman. Despite this, it is advisable for non-Chinese to avoid calling a person Xiao something or Lao something unless they are so called by other Chinese people and it is clear that the appellation is acceptable and widely used. Otherwise, the use of the person's full name, or alternatively, the surname followed by Zhancheng or Enshi is relatively neutral and unlikely to cause offense, whereas titles in many cultures are commonly solely determined by gender and, in some cases, marital status. The occupation or even work title of a person can be used as a title as a sign of respect and common address in Chinese culture. Because of the prestigious position of a teacher in traditional culture, a teacher is invariably addressed as such by his or her students, and commonly by others as a mark of respect. Where applicable, teacher surname is considered more respectful than Mr., Mrs., Miss surname in Chinese. A professor is also commonly addressed as teacher, though professor is also accepted as a respectful title. By extension, a junior or less experienced member of a workplace or profession would address a more senior member as teacher. Similarly, engineers are often addressed as such, though often shortened to simply the first character of the word engineer. Chinese pinyin, gong. Should the person being addressed be the head of a company, one might equally address them by the title zong, which means general or overall, and is the first character of titles such as director general or general manager, or, if they are slightly lower down on the corporate hierarchy but nonetheless a manager, by affixing jingli.